They found his body 3 hours later. The news reported it as a tragedy, a titan of industry gone too soon. But the police report missed the most important clue. It missed the 20 minutes he spent at a rundown diner just before he died. It missed the conversation he had with a waitress named Jenny, who had exactly $4 in her bank account. And it definitely missed what he slipped into her apron pocket. This wasn't just a random act of kindness. It was a transfer of power. And when Jenny woke up the next morning, she wasn't just a witness. She was the most hunted woman in America. This is the story of how a cup of coffee brought down an empire. The rain in Portland didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, the dead hour at Sal's all-day breakfast, a diner that smelled permanently of bacon grease and lemon floor cleaner. Jenny Coleman wiped down the counter for the third time. She was 24, with tired eyes and hair tied back in a messy bun that had given up hours ago. Her feet throbbed in her non-slip shoes. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. Another overdue notice from the electric company. She ignored it. She had to focus on the tips. The bell above the door jingled, a hollow, tinny sound that barely cut through the drumming of the rain against the plate glass. A man walked in. He didn't belong here. It wasn't just the suit, though the suit was Italian wool, charcoal grey, and tailored to within an inch of its life. It was the way he carried himself. He moved with the heavy, weary gravity of a man who had been so carrying the world and had finally decided to set it down. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair plastered to his forehead by the rain and spectacles that had fogged up the moment he stepped inside. He didn't look around for a host. He walked straight to booth 4, the one in the far back corner where the vinyl was cracked and the light bulb flickered. Jenny watched him. Usually, guys like this, corporate types who took a wrong turn off the highway, were loud. They demanded sparkling water or complained that the Wi-Fi was slow. But this man just sat. He stared at the laminate table surface as if it were a map of a war zone. Jenny grabbed a pot of coffee and a mug. She walked over, her rubber soles squeaking on the linoleum. "Coffee?" she asked. The man didn't blink. His hands were clasped in front of him, resting on the table. Jenny noticed his knuckles were white. He was trembling. Not a shiver from the cold, but a deep, tectonic vibration, like an engine about to blow. "Sir?" Jenny tried again, softening her voice. He looked up. His eyes were blue, piercing but bloodshot. There was a desperation in them that stopped Jenny cold. It was the look of a man who was seeing the edge of a cliff. "Black," he said. His voice was gravel, unused. "Please." Jenny poured the coffee. The steam rose up between them. He didn't reach for the mug. He just watched the black liquid settle. Most waitresses would have walked away. The diner rule was simple. Turn the tables, get the tips, don't get involved. But Jenny saw something familiar in that tremble. She had seen it in her father before he drank himself into the grave. She had seen it in the mirror on the mornings she didn't know how she would feed her 4-year-old brother, Leo. She put the pot down on the table, lingering. She looked at the Rolex on his wrist. It was worth more than her entire life's earnings, and then back at his face. "Are you okay, sir?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the smell of frying onions. The man blinked. The mask of the wealthy CEO cracked, just for a fraction of a second. He looked at Jenny. He really looked at her, scanning her name tag, her frayed apron, the tired lines around her mouth. "No," he whispered. It was a confession. "No, Jenny. I don't think I am." Jenny pulled her order pad out of her apron, but she didn't write anything. "Is there someone I can call? A driver? A family member?" The man let out a dry, humorless laugh. Family, that's a complicated word today. He reached into his inner suit jacket pocket. Jenny stiffened, instinctually stepping back, but he only pulled out a heavy, leather-bound notebook and a fountain pen. "I need a witness," he said, his voice gaining a sudden, sharp clarity. "Not for a crime, for a conscience." "I don't understand," Jenny said. "You don't need to understand. You just need to serve me a slice of cherry pie." He paused. "And I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If anyone asks, tell them Arthur Harrington was alone." Jenny's breath hitched. Arthur Harrington. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. He was the CEO of Harrington Voss, the massive pharmaceutical conglomerate that had headquarters in the steel skyscrapers downtown. He was a billionaire. He was the kind of man who ate at Michelin-star restaurants, not Sal's. "Mr. Harrington," she stammered. "The pie, Jenny," he said gently, opening the notebook. "Please." Jenny rushed to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking as she cut the pie. "Who's the stiff?" Sal, the owner, grunted from the grill, flipping a burger. "Just a guy," Jenny said, remembering the promise. "Just a sad old guy." When she returned to booth 4, Arthur Harrington was writing furiously. He was tearing pages out of the notebook, crumpling some, smoothing others. He looked like a man running out of time. She placed the pie down. He didn't touch it. He closed the notebook with a snap. He looked at the window, where a black SUV had just pulled up to the curb across the street. The engine was idling. Arthur's face went pale. "They're faster than I thought," he muttered. He stood up. He left the coffee steaming. He left the pie untouched. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope and the leather notebook. "Take this," he commanded. He shoved them into her hands. The leather was warm. "Sir, I can't—" "Hide it," he hissed, his eyes locking onto hers with terrifying intensity. "Do not open the envelope until you are safe. Do not let anyone see that book, especially not the man with the silver cane." "Who?" "Go to the back," Arthur Harrington ordered. "Now. Act like you're working." Jenny, terrified by the sudden shift from sadness to command, backed away. She shoved the items deep into the kangaroo pocket of her apron, covering them with her order pad. Arthur Harrington straightened his tie. He took a deep breath, composed his face into a mask of icy indifference, and walked toward the front door. Jenny watched from the service window. Arthur stepped out into the rain. The back door of the black SUV opened. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a trench coat, holding a silver-handled cane. They exchanged words. Arthur got into the car. The SUV peeled away, disappearing into the grey mist of Portland. Jenny looked down at her apron. It felt heavy. She didn't know it yet. But Arthur Harrington hadn't just left a tip. He had left her a target on her back. 20 minutes later, the sirens started. It wasn't just one police car. It was a cavalcade. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police cruisers screamed past the diner, heading toward the Burnside Bridge. Jenny was still shaking. She had retreated to the employee locker room, a cramped closet that smelled of mildew. She sat on a milk crate, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pulled the items out of her apron. The notebook was old, the leather cracked. Embossed on the cover were the initials AH. The envelope was a standard white business envelope, sealed with red wax. Something archaic, something from a different century. She opened the notebook first. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger. But not numbers, names, dates, chemical formulas, and distinct, bold headings like Project Omega and the Falcon Protocol. On the very first page, scrawled in shaky blue ink, was a note. To whomever holds this book, if you are reading this, I am dead. My son, Richard, and his board of directors have authorized the release of a drug they know will kill thousands. I tried to stop it. They stopped me. This book is the proof. It is the only copy. Trust no one, especially the police. Find Detective Miller. Jenny felt the blood drain from her face. Richard Harrington? The Richard Harrington? The one who was currently running for governor? She dropped the book as if it were burning. "Jenny!" Sal yelled from the front. "Turn on the TV. You got to see this." She stuffed the book and envelope into her backpack, zipped it tight, and ran out to the front. Sal was standing on a chair, turning up the volume on the small television mounted in the corner. The diner had gone silent. 2 construction workers and an elderly couple were staring at the screen, mouths open. The banner at the bottom of the news channel read, "Breaking News. Tragedy on Burnside Bridge." The reporter, standing in the rain, looked frantic. "Confirming now that the vehicle belongs to Arthur Harrington, CEO of Harrington Voss. Witnesses say the SUV lost control and went through the guardrail, plunging into the Willamette River. Rescue crews are on the scene. But given the height and the current, police say survival is unlikely." Jenny grabbed the counter for support. The room spun. He just left here, she thought. He was just here. "Suicide, they're saying," Sal muttered, shaking his head. "Guy had everything. Money, power. Why drive off a bridge?" "It wasn't suicide," Jenny whispered. Sal looked at her. "What?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I need to go home, Sal. I don't feel well." "You got 2 hours left on your shift, Jen." "I don't care. Keep the tips." Jenny grabbed her coat and ran out the back door into the alleyway. The rain soaked her instantly. She clutched her backpack to her chest. She needed to get to Leo. She needed to get home. She sprinted down the alley, splashing through puddles. She turned the corner onto 4th Street, intending to catch the bus. Then she stopped. Parked at the bus stop, idling in the no-parking zone, was a black sedan. Not the SUV from earlier, but similar. The windows were tinted, pitch black. 2 men in dark raincoats were standing by the bus shelter, showing a picture to a homeless man. Jenny ducked behind a dumpster. She held her breath. The wind carried their voices. Waitress. Brown hair. Name tag says Jenny. She was working the booth. The homeless man shrugged. The man in the raincoat handed him a $20 bill. "If you see her, you call this number." She stole something from Mr. Harrington. Jenny slid down against the wet brick wall. They weren't just looking for the book. They were looking for her. She couldn't go home. If she went to her apartment, they would be waiting. But Leo was there with the babysitter, Mrs. Higgins. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers were slippery with rain. She dialed Mrs. Higgins. "Hello?" the old woman answered. "Mrs. Higgins, it's Jenny. Listen to me very carefully. I need you to take Leo and go to your sister's house in Gresham. Right now." "Jenny? What on earth?" "Don't ask questions. Just pack a bag for him and go. Tell anyone who asks that. Tell them I took him to the doctor." "Jenny, you're scaring me. Please, Mrs. Higgins. I'll explain later. Just go." She hung up and pulled the battery out of her phone. Arthur Harrington had warned her. Trust no one. She looked at the envelope again. She hadn't opened it yet. With trembling fingers, she tore the wax seal. Inside was a single key, a folded piece of paper, and a cashier's check. She unfolded the check first. It was made out to Jennifer Coleman. The amount was $500,000. Jenny stared at the zeros. It was enough to pay off her dad's debts, enough to move Leo to a safe neighborhood, enough to disappear. But the note beneath it chilled her to the bone. "This is not a gift. It is a retainer. You are now my executor." The key opens locker 402 at Union Station. Inside is the rest of the evidence. If you cash this check, they will track you. If you don't, you have no resources. The choice is yours. Stay alive." Jenny looked at the check, then at the key. She was standing in an alley behind a dumpster, holding $500,000 and a death sentence. She heard footsteps splashing in the alley, heavy boots, coming from the direction of the diner. "She went out the back," a voice shouted. It was Sal. He was talking to someone. "She ran out like 5 minutes ago. Thank you for your cooperation," a deep, smooth voice replied. Jenny didn't wait. She scrambled up the fire escape of the building next door, the metal groaning under her weight. She climbed until she reached the roof, threw herself over the parapet, and lay flat on the wet tar. Below, 3 men in suits emerged from the back of the diner. One of them looked up. Jenny pressed her face into the gravel of the roof. "Clear the area," the man with the cane said. Jenny recognized the cane from the window. "She has the ledger. Find the girl. Kill the girl. In that order." Jenny closed her eyes. Arthur Harrington hadn't just sat at her table. He had drafted her into a war. Jenny lay flat on the tar paper roof for 20 minutes, the gravel digging into her cheek until the voices in the alley faded. The rain had turned from a drizzle into a deluge, soaking through her thin waitress uniform. She was shivering violently, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. She crawled toward the south side of the building, peering over the edge. The alley was empty, save for the overflowing dumpsters and a stray cat seeking shelter. She descended the rusted fire escape, her knuckles white as she gripped the slippery metal railings. When her feet hit the pavement, she didn't run. Running attracted attention. Arthur Harrington's face had been the mask of a man who knew how the world worked, and he had transferred that burden to her. She walked, keeping her head down, hugging herself to hide the logo on her apron. She needed to think. She had a check for $500,000 in her pocket, yet she couldn't buy a bus ticket. Using the check would trigger an alert. Arthur had been clear about that. It was a cruel irony. She was holding a fortune, yet she was currently the poorest she had ever been. She ducked into a 24-hour laundromat 3 blocks away. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing flicker. A few people sat in plastic chairs, watching their lives spin in the suds. Jenny moved to the back, hiding behind a row of dryers. She pulled out the envelope again. The key. Locker 402, Union Station. That was across town, a 40-minute walk in this weather, or a 10-minute cab ride she couldn't afford. She checked her pockets. Tips from the morning shift, $38.10. It would have to do. As she turned to leave, her eyes caught the TV mounted in the corner of the laundromat. The volume was low, but the crawl at the bottom of the screen froze her blood. Police seeking Jennifer Coleman for questioning regarding theft of Harrington Estate property. Her driver's license photo was on the screen. It was an old photo, one where she looked happier, younger. "Hey," a voice rasped behind her. Jenny spun around. An elderly woman with a laundry basket full of mismatched socks was squinting at her. She looked from Jenny to the TV and back again. "That you?" the woman asked, pointing a gnarled finger at the screen. "No," Jenny said, her voice cracking. "I just have a similar face." The woman snorted. "Honey, you got the same mole on your neck. You robbed that billionaire guy." Jenny's heart hammered against her ribs. "I didn't steal anything. He gave it to me." The woman looked at her, really looked at her, with eyes that had seen enough of the city's cruelty to know a desperate lie from a desperate truth. She reached into her basket and pulled out a large, moth-eaten grey wool coat. "Put this on," the woman grunted. "Your uniform is a dead giveaway, and get out of here. The owner calls the cops if people loiter for too long. Jenny took the coat. It smelled of lavender and stale cigarettes. "Thank you," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Run, girl," the woman said, turning back to her folding. "Rich men don't die by accident, and poor girls don't get on the news for nothing." Jenny buttoned the oversized coat, covering her uniform, and stepped back out into the night. She hailed a cab on Burnside Street. "Union Station," she told the driver, handing him a wad of crumpled $1 bills up front. "Keep the change. Just drive." The ride was a blur of neon lights smearing against the rain-streaked windows. Jenny clutched the backpack against her stomach. She thought of Leo. Was he safe with Mrs. Higgins? Had they made it to Gresham? If anything happened to him because of a cup of coffee she served to a stranger, she would never forgive herself. The cab pulled up to the historic train station. The red brick clock tower loomed into the night sky, a beacon of old-world transit. "Here you go," the driver said. Jenny stepped out. The station was bustling, even at this hour. Commuters, tourists, and drifters moved in a chaotic dance. It was the perfect place to disappear, or the perfect place to get trapped. She pulled the collar of the wool coat up to her chin and walked through the heavy brass doors. The grand hall was cavernous, echoing with the announcements of departures. Seattle, Los Angeles, Chicago. She scanned the signs. Lockers. West Wing. She began to walk, trying to match the pace of the crowd. But she felt eyes on her. Every security guard, every police officer, every person glancing up from their phone felt like a threat. She turned the corner toward the West Wing corridor. It was quieter here. The lockers lined the walls, floor to ceiling, metal coffins for temporary secrets. 400, 401, 402. It was a medium-sized locker at eye level. Jenny's hand shook as she pulled the brass key from her pocket. She looked left, then right. The corridor was empty, except for a janitor buffing the floor at the far end. She inserted the key. It turned with a satisfying click. She opened the door. Inside, there was no money. There was no gold. There was a single black burner phone, a thick manila folder, and a handgun. Jenny stared at the weapon. It was a snub-nose revolver, cold and ugly. She had never held a gun in her life. She reached for the folder instead. Suddenly, the phone in the locker rang. The sound was deafening in the quiet corridor. Ring. Ring. Jenny stared at it. Who knew she would be here right now? Only Arthur Harrington. And he was dead. She grabbed the phone and pressed the green button. "Hello?" she whispered. "Don't turn around," a male voice said. It wasn't the smooth voice of the man with the cane. This voice was rough, tired, and sounded like it had gargled with whiskey and gravel. "Listen to me very carefully, Jenny. You have about 30 seconds before Graves and his men box you in." "Who is this?" "I'm the guy Arthur told you to find. I'm Miller. Now, grab the gun. Put it in your pocket. Do not touch the trigger." "I can't." "Grab the damn gun, Jenny, and walk toward the janitor. Don't look at him. Just walk past him and take the service door to his right. It leads to the loading docks." "How do I know you're not with them?" "Because if I was with them," Miller growled, "you'd already have a bullet in the back of your head. Move." Jenny grabbed the gun and the folder, shoved them into her backpack, and slammed the locker shut. She started walking. At the other end of the corridor, the double doors swung open. The man with the silver cane stepped through. He was flanked by two other men in dark suits. They scanned the hallway. Their eyes landed on Jenny. "There," the man with the cane said calmly. Jenny broke into a run. "Stop her!" The shout echoed off the marble walls. Jenny didn't look back. She sprinted toward the janitor, who was seemingly oblivious to the commotion, the buffer machine roaring. The door. Miller's voice shouted from the phone she was still clutching. "To the right. Kick it open." Jenny saw the grey metal door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." She hit the crash bar with her shoulder, bursting through into a humid, concrete tunnel that smelled of diesel fumes. She was on the loading platform. Massive freight trains idled on the tracks, their engines humming like sleeping beasts. She ran down the platform, dodging pallets of cargo. Behind her, the door banged open. She went toward the tracks. Jenny scrambled over a coupling between two freight cars. Her coat snagged on a bolt. She yanked it free, hearing the fabric tear. She dropped to the gravel on the other side, putting the train between her and her pursuers. "Where are you?" she screamed into the phone. "Look for the blue pickup truck parked by the maintenance shed. North end of the yard. Run!" Jenny saw the shed in the distance, illuminated by a flickering floodlight. A battered blue Ford F-150 was idling there, exhaust pumping white smoke into the rain. She sprinted, her lungs burning. A gunshot cracked through the air, a sharp, distinct sound that was nothing like the movies. A puff of gravel exploded 3 feet to her left. They were shooting at her. They were actually shooting at her. She dove toward the truck. The passenger door swung open. "Get in!" Jenny threw herself into the cab. The driver didn't wait for her to close the door. He slammed on the gas, the tires spinning in the mud before finding traction. The truck fishtailed violently, then roared forward, smashing through a chain-link gate and bouncing onto the wet asphalt of the service road. Jenny slammed the door shut and gasped for air, her heart feeling like it was going to explode out of her chest. She looked at the driver. Jack Miller looked exactly like his voice sounded. He was in his 50s, wearing a leather jacket that had seen better decades. His face was a map of bad decisions, deep lines, a scar running through his left eyebrow, and grey stubble that hadn't seen a razor in days. But his hands on the steering wheel were steady, and his eyes, checking the rearview mirror, were sharp and calculating. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a hangover waiting to happen. "You okay?" he grunted, taking a sharp left turn that threw Jenny against the window. "They shot at me," Jenny stammered. "Yeah. Graves doesn't like loose ends. Check the backpack. Make sure you got the folder." Jenny opened her bag. The folder was there. The gun was there. "Who are you? Are you a cop?" Miller let out a short, bitter laugh. "Used to be. Detectives don't drive trucks like this, kid. I'm a private investigator. Or at least I was until Arthur Harrington hired me 3 weeks ago to dig his own grave." He checked the mirror again. "We lost him, for now." He slowed the truck down as they merged onto the highway, blending in with the late-night traffic. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, hard dread. "He's dead, isn't he?" Miller asked softly. "Arthur." "Yes," Jenny said. He drove off the Burnside Bridge. Miller hit the steering wheel with the palm of his hand. "Damn it, Arthur. I told him not to run. I told him we needed to go to the feds together." "He gave me this," Jenny said, holding up the notebook she had taken from the diner. "And the folder from the locker." Miller glanced at the notebook. His eyes widened. "The ledger. He actually got it out of the building." "What is it?" "It's the kill list, Jenny. Harrington Voss isn't just making drugs. They're making a synthetic opioid called Nirvana. It's 10 times stronger than fentanyl and highly addictive. In the trials, it killed 40% of the test subjects. Liver failure, sudden cardiac arrest. But the profit margins are in the billions." Miller took a cigarette from a pack on the dashboard and lit it with a shaky hand. Arthur found out his son, Richard, was burying the trial results to get FDA approval. Richard is the one running for governor. He needs the stock price to skyrocket to fund his campaign. If this book gets out, Richard goes to prison for life, and the company crumbles. Jenny looked at the notebook in her lap. It looked so ordinary, just paper and ink. So they killed Arthur. Arthur tried to threaten them. He thought being the father would protect him. He was wrong. Richard hired Graves, that guy with the cane. He's a cleaner from the dark web. He makes problems disappear. Miller looked at Jenny. And now you're the problem. I just served him coffee, Jenny whispered, a sob rising in her throat. I have a little brother. I can't die, Miller. I have to take care of Leo. Miller's expression softened. Where is the kid? My babysitter took him to Gresham, to her sister's house. Miller nodded. Good. Keep them there. Do not call them. Graves can trace calls faster than you can blink. We need to go off the grid. Where are we going? Safe house, Miller said. My ex-wife's cabin in the woods near Mount Hood. She hasn't used it in years. No internet, no landline. We can lay low, go through the evidence, and figure out how to get this to the New York Times before Graves puts us in the ground. They drove in silence for an hour. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by the looming darkness of the fir trees. Jenny clutched the gun in her pocket. She felt a strange shift inside her. The fear was still there, but it was hardening into something else. Anger. Arthur Harrington had chosen her. He had seen something in her face at the diner. Maybe he saw a fighter. Miller. Yeah? Why did he pick me? There were other people in the diner. Miller took a long drag of his cigarette. Arthur was a man of numbers, Jenny, but he was also superstitious. He told me once that the only honest people left in the world are the ones who serve others for minimum wage. Maybe he just wanted to give the weapon to someone who actually knew what it felt like to be stepped on. The truck turned onto a gravel road. The headlights cut through the dense forest. Suddenly, Miller slammed on the brakes. "What?" Jenny cried out. "Get down!" Miller shouted, shoving her head toward the dashboard. Ahead of them, a tree had fallen across the road. But it wasn't a storm that knocked it down. The cut was clean, made by a chainsaw. And standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by the high beams, was a solitary figure. It wasn't the man with the cane. It was a woman. She was wearing tactical gear and holding a suppressed assault rifle. She raised the weapon. "Reverse!" Jenny screamed. Miller threw the truck into reverse, the tires screaming, but another set of headlights blinded them from behind. Another SUV blocked the retreat. "It's a trap," Miller said, reaching for his own gun under the seat. "They tracked the truck. Probably a GPS tag I didn't find." He looked at Jenny. "Can you shoot?" "No." "Well," Miller said, kicking his door open and clicking the safety off his pistol. "Tonight's a good night to learn. Stay in the car. Lock the doors." Miller rolled out of the truck, firing 2 shots into the darkness. The windshield shattered as return fire erupted from the tree line. Jenny screamed, covering her head. Glass rained down on her. She looked at the gun in her hand, the revolver Arthur had left her. She realized with a terrifying clarity that no one was coming to save her. The billionaire was dead. The cop was pinned down. Jenny Coleman unbuckled her seatbelt. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a witness, and she wasn't going to die in a truck. She kicked the passenger door open and rolled into the muddy ditch, disappear into the darkness of the forest, just as the truck exploded into a fireball behind her. The explosion didn't sound like a boom. It felt like a punch to the solar plexus that sucked the air out of the entire forest. Jenny lay face down in the freezing muck of the drainage ditch, her hands clamped over her head. The heat from the burning truck washed over her, battling the biting chill of the rain. For a moment, she couldn't hear anything but a high-pitched ringing, a tinnitus scream that drowned out the world. Then, the sound returned, the crackling of fire, the hissing of rain hitting molten metal, and voices. "Target 1 is down," a woman's voice said. It was calm, professional, detached. Scanning for target 2, the girl. Jenny stopped breathing. She was 10 feet away from them, hidden only by the lip of the ditch and the darkness. She clutched the revolver so tight her fingers ached. 6 shots, she told herself. I have 6 shots. She began to crawl. She moved not like a soldier, but like a terrified animal, dragging herself through the mud, inch by inch, away from the flickering orange light of the wreckage. Spread out, a male voice commanded. Use thermal. If she's in the woods, she'll light up like a Christmas tree. Thermal. Jenny froze. If they had heat-seeking scopes, she was dead. She looked around frantically. To her right, the ditch ran under a concrete culvert pipe that channeled water under the road. It was clogged with rotting leaves and freezing sludge. It was her only chance. She slid into the pipe. The water was waist-deep and shockingly cold, sapping the heat from her body instantly. She submerged herself up to her neck, pressing her back against the slimy concrete. The cold would mask her body heat. It was a trick she'd seen in a movie once. She prayed it worked in real life. Heavy boots crunched on the gravel above her. A beam of red light swept across the opening of the pipe. Nothing here, the woman said. She must have run deep into the tree line before the blast. Tracker. Graves wants the ledger tonight. The footsteps moved away, fading into the rhythmic dripping of the forest. Jenny waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Her teeth began to chatter, a sound that seemed deafening in the pipe. She couldn't stay here. Hypothermia would kill her faster than a bullet. She crawled out the other side of the road, shivering violently. She needed to find Miller. He had rolled out of the truck before the explosion. Was he alive, or was she truly alone? She moved into the dense tree line, the Douglas firs towering above her like black giants. She circled back toward where the ambush had started, moving slowly. She found him 20 yards from the burning truck. Miller was slumped against the base of a massive oak tree. He wasn't moving. Jenny's heart dropped. She crept closer, whispering his name. Miller? One of his eyes opened. It was glassy with shock. His hand was pressed against his side, and blood was seeping between his fingers, black and thick in the moonlight. Kid, he wheezed. You made it. You're hurt, Jenny said, dropping to her knees beside him. She ripped off the sleeve of her wool coat, the one the old woman in the laundromat had given her, and pressed it against his wound. Miller groaned through gritted teeth. Through and through. Missed the gut, I think. Hit the hip bone. We have to get you to a hospital. No hospital, Miller spat, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Those weren't mercenaries, Jenny. I saw their patches when the flash went off. They're sheriff's deputies. Multnomah County SWAT. Jenny stared at him, the horror settling in. The police? The police are trying to kill us? Richard Harrington bought the department a long time ago, Miller coughed. If we call 911, we're just ordering our own execution squad. So what do we do? Jenny asked, her voice trembling. We have no car. You can't walk. We're in the middle of nowhere. Miller pointed a shaky finger deeper into the woods. My ex-wife's cabin. It's not far, half a mile north. Follow the ridge. There's a medical kit there. Antibiotics. Sutures. I can't carry you. I can walk, Miller lied. He tried to stand and immediately collapsed, crying out in pain. Jenny looked at him. Then she looked at the burning truck. She thought about Leo, sleeping safely in Gresham. She thought about Arthur Harrington, a billionaire who died alone because he had no one to trust. Put your arm around my neck, Jenny commanded. Jenny, leave me. Take the book and run. Shut up, Miller. I'm a waitress. I've carried trays heavier than you for 12 hours a shift." She hauled him up. Ideally, it would have been heroic. In reality, it was clumsy and agonizing. Miller was dead weight, his feet dragging, his breath coming in ragged gasps. They stumbled through the underbrush. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot. The rain turned the forest floor into a mudslide. Twice they fell, sliding down embankments, covering themselves in filth. But every time, Jenny got back up and pulled Miller with her. It took them 40 minutes to go half a mile. The cabin was a rotting A-frame structure that looked like it hadn't been inhabited since the 90s. The windows were boarded up. Moss covered the roof. Jenny kicked the door in. The lock frame was rusted and gave way easily. She dragged Miller inside and collapsed onto the dusty floorboards. The air inside was stale, smelling of pine needles and mouse droppings, but it was dry. "Kitchen. Under the sink," Miller murmured, drifting in and out of consciousness. Jenny scrambled to the kitchenette. She found a rusty first aid box. It was old, but inside she found a bottle of rubbing alcohol, a sealed package of gauze, and a suture kit. She ran back to Miller. "This is going to hurt." "Do it," Miller gritted out. She cut away his shirt. The bullet had torn through the fleshy part of his hip. It was ugly, but the bleeding had slowed. She poured the alcohol over the wound. Miller screamed, a raw sound that she smothered with her hand. She wrapped him tightly. He passed out from the pain. Jenny sat back against the wall, the revolver in her lap. She was exhausted, cold, and covered in blood that wasn't hers. She watched the door, waiting for it to be kicked down. But the night remained silent. She reached into the backpack and pulled out the folder she had retrieved from locker 402. She needed to know what was worth all this death. She opened the manila folder. There were photos, grainy surveillance shots of Richard Harrington shaking hands with men in dark suits. She recognized one of them, a prominent senator. Another was a high-ranking FDA official. But the real smoking gun was a USB drive taped to a piece of paper. Jenny looked around the cabin. In the corner, covered in a dust sheet, was an old television and a VCR, but no computer. She couldn't read the drive. However, the paper the drive was taped to had a list. It was titled Operation Clean Slate. It was a list of names: Dr. Aris Thorne, deceased, car accident; Sarah Jenkins, deceased, overdose; Mark Cohen, deceased, robbery gone wrong; Arthur Harrington, pending. Jenny's finger traced the list. These were the scientists, the people who knew about the drug. They had been systematically murdered, and at the bottom of the list, handwritten in red ink, was a new entry. Jennifer Coleman, pending. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was on the payroll of the dead. Jenny closed the folder. A cold resolve settled over her. She looked at Miller, unconscious on the floor. She looked at her trembling hands. "You want me?" she whispered to the empty room. "Come and get me." She stood up and began to search the cabin. She found a rusty hunting knife, a heavy flashlight, and in the closet, a moth-eaten flannel shirt that was dry. She changed out of her uniform. She threw the apron, the symbol of her life of servitude, into the corner. She wasn't serving anyone anymore. Morning broke over the cabin with a grey, lifeless light. Miller was awake, checking the magazine of his pistol. He was pale and feverish, but his eyes were sharp. "We have to move," he said, holding up a crumpled newspaper clipping he'd grabbed the day before. Richard Harrington to announce gubernatorial bid. The Benson Hotel. 7:00 p.m. He's going to stand on a podium and talk about family values while his hitmen hunt us in the woods, Miller rasped. "This is where we hurt him. The USB drive contains Arthur's video confession. If we plug that into the AV system at the gala, we broadcast his crimes live to the world." "So let's go," Jenny said. "I can't." Miller shook his head, gesturing to his bleeding hip. "I'm burnt. Every cop has my face. It has to be you, Jenny." Getting back to Portland was a blur of stolen cars and back road buses. They holed up in a basement apartment in Chinatown, owned by one of Miller's old contacts. "I need to get you a uniform," Miller said, reaching for a burner phone. "You can slip in as catering staff." "No," Jenny said, staring into a cracked mirror. She washed the mud from her face. "If I go in as staff, I'm limited to the kitchen. Security checks badges. I need to walk in the front door." "Jenny, a ticket costs $10,000. "I don't need a ticket. I need a name." Jenny turned to him. "Find me a guest who isn't coming." Miller worked his keyboard. "Vanessa Vane, socialite. She's stuck in Houston with plane trouble." "Perfect," Jenny said. She pulled out the last of Arthur's cash. "I'm Vanessa Vane. I've watched rich women treat me like dirt for 6 years. I know exactly how to act." 7:15 p.m. The Benson Hotel. The Crystal Ballroom was a sea of diamonds and tuxedos. A limousine pulled up, and Jenny Coleman stepped out. She was wearing a floor-length emerald green gown she'd found at a consignment shop. Her hair was swept up in elegant waves, but her best accessory was her attitude. She walked past the valet, tossing him the keys without a glance. "Name?" the woman at the entrance asked, scanning her clipboard. "Vane," Jenny said, sounding bored. "Vanessa Vane. And hurry, please. My shoes are killing me." The woman hesitated, then stepped aside. "Right this way, Miss Vane." She was in. The class divide was the ultimate disguise. Jenny navigated the crowd, clutching her purse. Inside was the USB drive and the snub-nose revolver. Miller's voice buzzed in her ear. "AV room is on the 2nd floor. Get past the guard." She reached the velvet rope. A massive security guard blocked her path. "I need to go up," Jenny slurred slightly, leaning in. "I'm going to be sick. Unless you want vomit on your shoes, you'll let me use the private restroom." The guard grimaced and stepped aside. "Quickly, Mom." Jenny hurried up the stairs, straightening her spine as soon as she was out of sight. She approached the AV room door. "Miller, I'm at the door," she whispered. "Good. Go in. It should be Static screeched in her ear. "Miller?" Silence. Jenny took a breath and pushed the door open. The room wasn't empty, and it wasn't the AV technician inside. Graves, the man with the silver cane, stood there in a tuxedo, holding a suppressed pistol. "Ms. Coleman," he said smoothly. "Or should I say, Ms. Vane? You clean up nicely." Jenny froze. "Come in." Graves gestured with the gun. Sitting on the desk behind him was Richard Harrington. He looked at Jenny with amusement. "So, this is the waitress who cost me $20 million. "You killed your father," Jenny said, her voice shaking but defiant. "My father was weak," Richard shrugged. He hopped off the desk. "Give me the drive, Jenny, and I'll let you walk away." "And if I don't? Then you die. Your friend Miller dies. And your little brother. Leo? We found the house in Gresham. One phone call and it's over." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Jenny looked at Richard, then at the gun in Graves's hand. She slowly reached into her purse and pulled out the USB drive. "Smart girl," Richard smiled, extending his hand. Jenny smiled back. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "You think I'm smart?" she whispered. "Then you should know one thing about waitresses, Richard." "What?" "We always multitask." Jenny dropped the USB drive, and before it hit the floor, she drew the revolver and fired. The gunshot was deafening in the small, soundproofed room. Jenny didn't aim to kill, she aimed to stop. The bullet shattered Graves's knee, sending the hitman crumbling to the floor with a guttural scream. His gun skittered under a rack of servers. Richard Harrington flinched, throwing his hands up in a pathetic shield. "You're crazy! You shot him!" Jenny didn't hesitate. She lunged for the mixing console. "The drive!" Richard shrieked, scrambling forward. He thought she had dropped the evidence. He thought he had won. But as he grabbed Jenny by the hair to pull her back, he froze. The upload bar on the screen above the console was already at 90%. "You dropped it," Richard stammered, looking at the plastic rectangle on the carpet. "I saw you drop it." Jenny slammed her elbow into Richard's ribs, knocking the wind out of him. She shoved him into the wall. "That was a decoy," she panted, her eyes blazing. "You should know something about waitresses, Richard. We always multitask." Click. The upload hit 100%. The lights in the hotel died, plunging the AV room and the ballroom below into darkness. A moment of terrified silence followed. Then a voice boomed through the building, amplified by 10,000 watts. "My name is Arthur Harrington, and if you are hearing this, I have been murdered by my own son." The emergency power kicked in, illuminating the massive LED screen in the ballroom. 300 of Oregon's wealthiest elites stared in shock as the video of the late CEO played. "The drug known as Nirvana is a poison," Arthur's voice echoed like a judgment from the grave. To cover up the toxicity reports, Richard authorized the execution of 7 scientists. Here are the bank accounts used to pay the hitmen. In the booth, Richard slumped against the desk, watching his empire crumble in real time. "Turn it off," he whispered weakly. "Please." Graves, groaning on the floor, reached for his fallen pistol. "It doesn't matter," he wheezed. "We'll kill you. We'll kill your brother." "No one is dying tonight," a gravelly voice said from the doorway. Miller stood there, battered and bloody, leaning on a submachine gun he'd taken from a guard. Behind him stood 4 agents in FBI windbreakers. "Richard Harrington," the lead agent announced, weapons drawn. "You are under arrest for conspiracy and capital murder." Richard looked at the agents, then at the screen where his father was listing his crimes, and finally at Jenny. The arrogance broke. He was just a small man in an expensive suit. "Why?" he asked Jenny as they cuffed him. "You could have taken the money. You're just a nobody. Why risk your life for a dead man?" Jenny smoothed her torn green dress, standing tall. "Because," she said softly, "Arthur asked me if I was okay. It was the first time in 10 years anyone actually cared about the answer." 6 months later. The rain in Portland felt different now. Cleaner. The sign above the diner was new. The silver pot. Inside, the smell of grease was gone, replaced by fresh coffee and cinnamon. Jenny stood behind the counter, wearing a crisp white shirt. She looked healthy. Safe. Leo was in a private school down the street, his future secured by the whistleblower reward. The bell jingled. Miller walked in, looking better than he had in years. He sat at booth 4. "Coffee?" Jenny asked, walking over. "Black, please." Miller smiled. "I saw the news. Richard got life without parole. It's finally over, kid." "It is," Jenny nodded. She looked at the spot where Arthur had sat that rainy afternoon. She didn't need the notebook anymore. She had won. The door opened again. A young girl walked in. She was soaking wet, shivering, and counting pennies in her palm. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that goes down to the bone. She looked exactly like Jenny had 6 months ago. Jenny didn't wait. She grabbed a fresh pot of coffee and walked out from behind the counter. She bypassed the paying customers and walked straight to the girl. "Hey," Jenny said gently, "put your money away. This one's on the house." The girl looked up, startled. "Really? I can't pay you back." "I know." Jenny smiled, guiding her to a warm booth. "I just have one question." The girl blinked. "What?" Jenny Coleman, the waitress who brought down an empire, looked at the girl and asked the only question that mattered. "Are you okay?" That is the story of Jenny Coleman. It reminds us that sometimes the smallest people cast the biggest shadows. A single act of kindness, or a question as simple as "Are you okay?" can change the course of history. Jenny didn't just survive. She changed the world because she refused to be invisible. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a thriller like this. What would you have done if you found the notebook? Would you have taken the money and run, or stayed to fight? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.